Welcome all to the final session of tonight, or this week's Referee Development Week. Hopefully you've all found it useful. I'm pleased and delighted tonight to be able to welcome Lee Waters, who's involved at the University Centre of Peterborough as well as at Peterborough United Women. I won't take too much of his thunder for his introduction though. Lee, I'll hand straight over to you, sir.
Cheers. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for inviting me this evening, and welcome to everyone on this lovely Friday evening. To the session that we're going to be covering a little bit of psychology that has been entitled Preparing and Staying Mentally Strong. So we can start to have a look at what we're going to be covering during this session. We're going to have a look at the stress process. We're going to have a little bit of look at the brain and what happens to the brain, and understand why what happens. Discuss the concepts of mental fortitude, something that has been really glorified during these Olympics, if you've had the chance to watch any of the tremendous performances going on. And then we're going to explore 7 tools. I'm going to give you 7 tools to be able to use to your discretion to assist with the mental side of performance. Before we move on any further though, what I would love for you to do is, based on these things that I've kind of outlined, and also what is your understanding of psychology and how it could potentially help your performance, I'd like you to think about what you would like to get from this session, and then keep that with you, that thought with you. If you want to write it down, by all means do, and we'll discuss it at the end, and we can kind of get through it, and hopefully I'll answer the question before we get to the end, but if not, by all means ask it as we get through. So just spend a few seconds just going through that and thinking, what do you specifically want from this session? Okay, cool. So if we just keep that in the back of our heads, or if you've written it down, that is fantastic, and we'll move on. So as I've already been introduced, I'll breeze this over. So I'm a senior lecturer in sport and exercise psychology, currently at University Centre Peterborough. I'm going to be starting on pastures new in a month's time at University of Northampton, where I'll be taking over the applied sports psychology modules. I'm also a performance psychologist, work with Peterborough United, mainly the women, but also with some of the men's as well. And also I've had experience with professional referees, high-level referees, GB GB Olympians, etc., from that perspective. I'm also a primary practitioner in rational emotive behaviour therapy, and that's where we're going to be coming at this from tonight. And I'm also doing my PhD, okay, using some of these jazzy eye tracker technology, which you can see in the picture in the bottom right-hand corner. And we'll drop that in as we kind of go through. But I'd just like to set the scene. Which is something I'm sure you're all aware of, but I think it's just worth reiterating before we kind of go any further, is that the intensity of football has increased. There is all the data to suggest that football intensity, the distances being covered, the speed at which people are covering, the pass rates, the number of sprints, all these kind of things, they're all on the increase within the world of sport. And that's due typically to different level coaching, sports science getting involved, different understanding of the game, new techniques, all of these kind of things. So what does that mean for you guys? What does that mean for you guys as a referee? At this present moment in time, there's approximately 245 game-related decisions per 90 minutes, which is 1 decision every 22 seconds. Which is a crazy amount of decisions to have to think about. And this is steadily on the increase by about 2 to 3% each year. And it's because the game is getting quicker. And this is not just at professional level, this is going all the way down into grassroots level. Things are getting more accessible now to a variety of different teams, variety of different levels, and you can increase the intensity of your teams. So things are only going to get better and quicker. So I just want you to think about a past situation, okay? This is how I'm going to introduce the stress process. I just want you to think about a situation in which you have gone through before. And I want you to recall a situation in which you've officiated and you've suddenly realized you've made a wrong decision. I want you to think about, in that situation, what emotions did you experience? And then consider why that was the case. So when you were officiating, we all make mistakes, and as much as footballers don't think that they do, they make plenty of mistakes on a football pitch. With regards to this, just think about a potential situation where you made a wrong decision, and what did that do to you from an emotional perspective? And consider, why did you think that? Why did you go through that process? Now I'm going to open it up to the floor and ask anyone to make a contribution, to say, and open up and put their hands up and say, yeah, I made a wrong decision. It was this. And what emotions did you experience at the time? So I'm going to open it up to the floor at a risk of getting a tumbleweed moment. But I'm going to open it up and ask, what decision did you get wrong? And what did you experience at the given time from an emotional perspective? If anyone would like to contribute. Oh, I thought we were going to get a contribution there. We've had a tumbleweed moment.
Hello.
Hello, thank you.
Good evening. Hi. Yeah, so I've had plenty of wrong decisions. But, one of them was really early flag up in an offside position. So I did that because I think I was under pressure, and I thought that everyone from that pitch, including the players and supporter, are gonna judge me from that point as being a bad assistant referee, and it made me feel a bit unconfident, like being not confident anymore.
Okay.
I've tried to be focused on that and be like, no, I'm not. This mistake is not gonna define me as an official, but it still had an impact on myself. Yeah.
No, great. Thank you. It's a great contribution. Thank you very much for that. And it is something. It's great that you mentioned offsides. That's what my PhD is actually in. So my PhD is based on officials, and it's on the offside decision, the processes which people go through in order to make them. And it's a tough decision. It's a tough thing to get right in the world of football. And from what you just said, and once again, thank you very much for your contribution. It is a case of, you seem to have gone straight to, what are people going to think about this decision? Are they going to think I'm a bad referee? And which caused you to have maybe a little bit of a decrease in confidence. So I want you, if everyone can kind of relate to that, we'll kind of move on at the risk of getting any more tumbleweed moments. But thank you very much for that contribution. It really sets the tone for where we're going with this kind of process, because this is really, really key. I'd like you to think about the future now. So potentially close your eyes if you need to do that. Imagine a situation where you are preparing to officiate a level of game you have never done so before. It's a higher level than you're used to. It's a higher level than you've ever been done before, and you've just been appointed, and you're absolutely buzzing about it, but potentially you are going through another set of emotions in relation to it. Okay, so it could be your first final, or it could be a league up, a step up, something like that. I want you to think about what emotions you potentially may experience at that time. Think about why that may be the case. Why would you potentially feel those emotions going into that? You're about to go into your first ever final. What emotions would you potentially be experiencing at this time? So just reflect on that internally, go through that process. Think about what you potentially would go through. You may have even experienced this before already in your careers, and gone into finals and things like that. How did you feel before it? Okay. So I'm not going to ask you a contribution at this point, because obviously on the dreaded Zooms and things like this, there are moments where there's deathly silence. So we'll kind of lose the flow of the session. But I just would like you to each think about this situation. You're going into a level of game that you've never been in before. What emotions would you experience and why? And this is an introduction to what's known as the stress process, and it's a perfectly normal, natural thing. It's a perfectly normal thing. No one should be afraid of it. No one should be worried about it. No one should be thinking, oh my God, I'm different or something like that, because you have gone through this process. It was effectively, through evolution, it effectively was a defense mechanism to run away from danger and things like that. And it's been evolved over time. Effectively, what we do as a human being is we see a situation, we see what we need to be able to do in that situation. Are we able to match that situation? Are we good enough? Have we got the skills in order to be able to be successful in that situation? And then we have a behavior. Then you will see what our response is. Okay? So we see the situation, we assess it, we look at it, we see whether we can match it, and we then have a behavioral response. And that's life. That's in everything. That's not just in football. That's not just in sports. This is also within life. Okay, this is a standard process that we all go through. Now, some of us may look at the situation and think, oh my God, I'm not suitable for this. I haven't got the skills. Others may be thinking the other way. I'm looking at this situation and yes, I've got the skills. So depending on the approach, depends on whether we have a stress response. Do we get a really significant stress response? Now with that, what that means is, now the brain is fantastic. It's a great piece of kit. It's the best computer you'll ever own. You will never own a quicker one. You will never own one that has better storage. You will never own one that has the ability to learn like this. It's the best thing we will ever have in our lives, if used properly, because it can be our friend and it can also be our enemy. On the left-hand side, it's a graphic to try to kind of show that we literally create pathways within our body. We literally create pathways within our brain. Hopefully this evening, you're learning some new things. So we're literally creating these pathways as we go kind of through. Now, I want you to have a look at the right-hand side, and you don't need to remember all of these terms. Obviously, it's not that kind of session, but it's just so you know which part I'm talking about. The front of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex, and it's quite small, and that is the thing that has most of the opportunity or most of the functioning for our decision making. Now, the trouble is, the reason I mention that is because the stress process, if we become stressed for about 20 seconds, that section of the brain becomes quite small. So in the example that we had before, of that you potentially that you thought that you made an offside decision wrong, you may start to become stressed. Your prefrontal cortex will become smaller. Because your prefrontal cortex becomes smaller, you can't make decisions. If you can't make decisions as effectively, it then starts to have a knock-on effect to the others. Now, this is all an emotional thing. This is all psychological. Yes, okay, it's happening physiologically, shrinking, etc., but it's all caused by psychological elements. So the more we can stop this, the more we can manage it, the better. Okay, and that's the quest we're on, to try and stop this shrinkage, to try and make sure that we're in control of our thought processes, and to try and ensure that we can make effective decisions as consistently as possible. That's our quest for the next half hour or so. Now, let's get you going. So let's have a look at concentration. Now, I've got a task that's going to fly up on the board on the screen in a second. and you have a minute in which to complete it. It's called a concentration grid, and you are required to try and make sure you get through as many numbers as you possibly can. Now you have to get from 00 to 01 to 02 to 03 to 04, and you have to find them on the grid. 00 is in the left-hand side, about halfway down, and you then have to find 01. You have 1 minute to try and get to as high a number as you possibly can, and then you're going to share that number when we finish in a minute's time. So starting in 3, 2, 1, go. You've had 20 seconds. Try and get to the next one. You've had 30 seconds. You've got 30 seconds left. Try and find the next number. Keep scanning. Keep looking at all over the grid. Where's that next number? Where are you trying to find it? You've got 15 seconds left. Keep going. You've got 10 seconds left. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and stop there. Okay. Just shout out some numbers to me. What numbers did you get to? I'm really intrigued to know how many what people got to.
8.
Thank you.
14.
Thank you.
17.
8.
Brilliant. Thank you.
8.
8. Brilliant.
7.
7.
8.
8. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. Would people be surprised if I said that the elite, so like elite athletes, would potentially get up to the likes of 48, 49, 50 in this? Were people surprised at that, possibly? With this activity, it's trying to prove a point. It's trying to get you to a point where you are having to look for information at the same point. It's trying to get you to scan using your eyes. It's also trying to get you to deal with emotion, okay? Because you potentially reflect on how you were feeling as you were going through that. Did you start to get a little bit frustrated? Could you not find the next number? You were starting to get, as you started to hear me counting down, did you start to feel a little bit more pressured? All of these things potentially hindered you being able to do this simple task. Now, this wasn't set up to trip you up in any shape or form. It was just to try a novel way over a screen, the best way that we could probably do to try and improve a point. So what just happened? What just happened to your brain in that exercise? Typically, what just happened is your prefrontal cortex started shrinking. It started to become a little bit flustered. So if you are only getting to your 8s and your 9s, potentially that was because you were looking along and you were maybe getting a little bit frustrated, a little bit emotional at this. You may have started thinking of relatively simple task. Okay. So what was happening to the brain was it knew what it had to do, but it was having a mini stress response. Now, obviously, looking at a screen, some numbers, it doesn't mean all that much. Okay, so it wasn't exactly a massive stress, but I'm trying to just prove a little point here is that could be something that happens. Now, I've got another little task here of what's going to happen is numbers are going to flash up on the board. Okay, so they're going to quickly flash up on the screen. And if you do have a pen or piece of paper or your mobile phone near you, try and write the numbers down, okay? Or just verbalize the numbers from what, because they're only going to flash up onto the screen. We'll go through this and we'll see how we get on, okay? But literally, numbers are just going to flash up on the screen, and all I need to do is to either write them down or to verbalize them to yourselves. Okay, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Here's your first one. Okay, so they're going to quickly flash up on the screen. Try and recall what these numbers are. So not only are you having to scan the screen as to where it's going to go, you also have to pick up what the information is. Now varying the speed, now you're having to think about what's going on, where's the new piece of information? There it is. Still scanning the screen, seeing what's going on. May start to think, what am I doing? Why is Lee getting me to do this? And there's your final one. So it's a very simple task. And it's kind of reiterates the point that we went through before, in the sense that you may start to get a little bit frustrated. You may be looking at it and thinking, I need to concentrate, I need to focus, I need to do all of these things. Now, I'm going to use a phrase that potentially you all may be aware of, and it's you need to focus more. You need to focus more. And that's something that is commonly said. I'm going to challenge that and say, actually, you don't need to focus more at all. What is more preferable is to focus on the right pieces of information. So you don't need to focus more. It's just selecting what pieces of information are more relevant to make your next decision, to assist you with your emotional regulation and things like that. So the little activity that I've just gone through with you, we were looking at numbers, and you may be looking at it and getting a little bit annoyed because you may have missed something or something like that. And that then potentially starts to compound into certain things. Now, we've all had games. We've all had games that within the first 5 minutes, you've made a decision and it wasn't the right decision. And it maybe starts to play on your mind a little for the next few minutes. And then that compounds into the next one. And then that compounds into the next one. And it has an effect until you get to half time and you can have a little conversation with yourself. Those happen. And if they haven't happened yet, they will happen. Perfectly normal, perfectly natural thing to happen. That's what these activities are about. It's kind of to show, actually, this is happening to our brain. It's a natural reaction, but we can manage it. We can go through this process of trying to manage it. So what is happening? It's our emotions that are starting to have an effect. So stress can either be positive and it can be negative. The positive side of stress is being at the fight or flight mechanism. So we can have a reaction where our heart rate increases, adrenaline is increased. So we have to run away from something, or we have to fight something or something like that. The negative side is something that is building up. It just builds up and builds up and builds up, and it can be very, very negative. And that starts to shrink the area that is highlighted on the picture. Anxiety is always considered to be a negative emotion, and it can be experienced both through the body and through the brain. The body, sweaty palms, you can get flushed cheeks. Cognitive, start having a bit of a brain fog, or your thinking process is a little bit not as good as what it usually is. Now, the thing about anxiety is that it's usually about the future. You get anxious about what potentially could happen as opposed to what has happened. So anxiety is usually about what could happen. What is going to happen if I make the wrong decision? People are going to say this. People are going to think this, that kind of thing. It hasn't happened yet, but you are getting anxious about it. Once again, something that happens. And arousal can be both positive and negative. Arousal can be you going from literally being in bed, not wanting to get out of bed, to literally bouncing off the walls. So arousal is a full spectrum, and it's trying to keep that in check. So these three emotions is something that we need to be aware of. But the key need to move forward is that we need to have knowledge of them, and you as an individual need to be aware of them for you and how you react to them. But the single greatest constant in everything in history is that things change. That's just a thing. That's just a normal thing that happens. Games change all of the time, and as long as we accept that, we're on the start of the journey. We're on the start of the journey for this process. Now, this is onto the tools. This is onto the tools of where we can start to assist ourselves. And it's this whole thing that's been mentioned in the Olympics quite a lot by a lot of the commentators, and it's called mental fortitude, but they've never actually outlined exactly what it is. But mental fortitude is actually the ability to focus on our solutions, solving problems in the face of adversity or any uncertainty within our lives. Okay, so it's the ability to focus on the right pieces of information, something I've already mentioned a few minutes ago. The characteristics are, instead of panicking, people with good mental fortitude tend to stay quite calm and think about possible solutions to the problem at hand. Now put yourself into situations in your head of stressful situations that you've thought about. Stuck in traffic or something in a game. You've made a decision. You know it's the correct decision. You know it's the correct decision. A penalty, something like that, or a free kick just outside the box. But the players are now starting to crowd around you. The players are now starting to plead their innocence, as they do. What do you do? How do you start to feel? What are your emotions at this point? And typically, mental fortitude is achieved by challenging yourself and not shying away from things that look hard. Sometimes it's good to be put yourselves into situations that you have to go through a process in order to try and achieve this. So how does that happen? How does that even remotely happen? Because once again, this is just buzzwords and it's just an overview. And this is it. So this is the process. This is the process for mental fortitude. And it's a really important one. It's a really important one to consider. Because if you don't define what you consider to be successful, how can you ever really be successful? So from the get-go, it's a good idea to think about what would you like to achieve? What would you like to achieve long term? What would you like to achieve medium term, short term? Those kind of things. Define your win. In this session, I asked you to think about what did you want from this session. So I've already set the ball rolling with that. What do you want from this session? From that, we're going to start to have a look at creating efficient procedures, and that's the tools that I'm going to talk to you about. Set priorities, evaluations, control, all of these things, these step-by-step processes are going to be the tools that we're going to discuss over the next 10, 15 minutes. But ultimately, what this is about is trying to create a roadmap to perform under perceived pressure. Now, notice that perceived is underlined and it's highlighted. Pressure is an interpretation. Pressure is something, in some ways, you could argue, is made up. It's made up in our heads. Because we could face a situation, each one of us, but each one of us will think about that situation in a different way. Pressure is not something I can just pick up and say, this is pressure. A glass, for example, or a chair, or a tree, or something like that, and say, this is what this is. Pressure is an interpretation. Pressure is something that we, as an individual, make up. So this is what something mental fortitude helps us with. So, and I'm going to send these. I'm going to send these through Stan. So there's going to be handouts for this if you want to go through this. So this is the first tool, and it's time to be honest with yourselves. From a psychological, technical, physical perspective, you could also put the rules in there as well. That would be good from this perspective. But the point is that it's time to be honest. What attributes do you need in order to be successful at officiating? And then rank yourself. Rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 of how good you think you are at that given attribute. So the psychological could be decision making. It could be calmness or concentration or something like that. From the technical aspect, it could be something from the ability to be able to run or something like that. You need to be thinking about how your running technique and being able to keep up with play, those kind of elements. Physical could be your actual speed, your fitness, that kind of thing. Be honest. Be honest with yourselves and score yourselves on these attributes. Think about where you're at this current place, or this current point in time. And then from there, there's this phrase that I tend to use, and it's, you can't build a castle on a swamp. And what I mean by that is this profile, I'll just flip back to it. This profile provides a structure to your training, to your games and things like that. Because if you are not sure what you need to work on, if you're not sure what you need to focus on, how can you once again ever improve? It's like not having a goal. It's like not knowing where you're going. How can you ever be successful if you've got no measure of it? So this is the same kind of thing. How can you improve if you don't know what you need to improve on? So that's something to consider. It's a beneficial process. It's beneficial to have a look at. So the example I'm going to use here is that my PhD uses eye tracker technology. You can see in the bottom right hand corner there's a blue cross that is looking that shows exactly where the official is looking. That's what eye tracker technology does. It tells me exactly where they're looking at a given point. And it's a really cool piece of kit. But it does highlight certain things within their processes of what they do and what they look at. So some people during this process have been highlighted to focus on things that are not useful in making an offside decision. Others have a clear, definitive pattern in which they go through, and that's been incredibly useful. So they've been following, rather than following the ball, going to the goalkeeper, all of that kind of stuff, and being distracted, they've gone from a process of last man, player on the ball, attacker. Last man, player on the ball, attacker. And that was the process. And that's typically what the research that I've found so far has been the most useful step-by-step process of that. Now, what we've got here is the next step of an emotional profile. Okay, the second tool of an emotional profile. Okay, what do you want to think? What do you want to feel in these different stages of leading up to an event? The night before, the morning of, 1 hour prior, 1 minute prior, and after the event. What desired emotion do you want to feel? Do you want to feel calm? Do you want to feel motivated? Do you want to feel ready, prepared? All of these kind of things. Now, this is completely down to you and how people react and how people get into certain moods. Now, I tend to listen to music to get me into the right mood. I tend to listen to music quite a lot. But what I listen to get me into a training mindset or a calm mindset, you actually may think that is completely different. What I think is quite high tempo, you may think is really chilling and relaxing. This is where people start to differentiate. The night before, some people like to review the session, also review what they're going to be doing and do research on the game and things like that. Potentially the teams that you're going to be officiating. Some people don't want to think about the game at all. But this is you. This is your second tool. What do you want to feel? And then come up with an action of matching that. So the morning of the event, rather than feeling all rushed and flustered, you could have already prepared your bag. You could have already prepared your whistle, your cards, your boots, your kit. Everything you need for your game is already ready in a bag, and you just need to pick it up, put your shoes on, and out the door you go, rather than running around the house trying to think about where everything is. Although that sounds very, very straightforward and very simple, it does help. It does help get you in the right frame of mind. The third tool is what is known as a trigger. Okay, if you are starting to feel an emotion that you feel is not beneficial to you, i.e. you are starting to feel a bit stressed, you're starting to feel a bit anxious, you're starting to feel a little bit disconcerted. Some people wear elastic bands, and although that might sound a little bit strange, people wear elastic bands so they can ping them onto their wrist, and it displaces that feeling. It gets you thinking about what's just happened to your wrist as opposed to the emotion that you're going through at that point. And it gives you a window. It gives you a window in order to reset and get back into the frame of mind. Now, people are not always fine with wearing elastic bands or hair bands on their wrist. Some people like to pinch, some people clap. I've seen some people slap their faces, some people punch their ears. And although this may sound a little strange, it is a very well recognized technique. It gives you a window to think about something else other than the emotional issue that you're going through right now. Remember, if you are becoming stressed, the brain is shrinking. Decisions are going to become harder. So the sooner that we can recognize it, the better. Within this, the game cycle, the fourth tool is the in-game cycle. And the main thing of this is the internal scan. Internally scan how you are feeling at a given point. Recognize if you're starting to feel a little bit aroused, too aroused, too stressed. Try and think about what's going on within your body. If you're out for a run, what is going on? Are you feeling out of breath? Typically, what do you do when that happens? You start to potentially slow down a little. Same kind of thing. Internally scan what's going on within your body, and then from a psychophysiological perspective, try and come up with a way in order to calm yourself down and get back into the emotional state that you were. And one of the things to consider is this reset. So the thing that I've asked you about with the elastic band, with the pinching, these may be some examples that may be useful to think about. So before kickoff, you may be starting to feel a little bit anxious. You may be starting, if it's the level above or something like that, like we were talking about, you may have made a mistake. There may be some confrontation, which is incredibly frustrating. Some negative crowd negative crowd noises or something like that. Simply making a decision, half time's a savior sometimes. It gives you an opportunity to have a look at things. So these are times then potentially you may want to look at resetting. This is one that's a little bit off the wall. I do completely accept that, which is the 5th tool, and it's called the highlight reel. But it is something to consider. And the first step is to think of a song. Get a song that's in your head and it gets you in the right way to perform. Some people prefer different songs to different people to get into the mood. Some people like listening to rocky music or something like that. Some people like listening to dance music or other things. Whatever gets you into the right emotional mood. Now, when I've done this with officials before, and when I've done this with players, what we have done is looked for pictures and videos of them performing. So these video pictures that I'm dropping in as we go through, I've used these with some officials, and we've put this in kind of like an iMovie or a similar piece of software, and we've put the music over the top of it, and the music is playing while these pictures of them doing really, really well then starts to show as you go through. Now, as you watch that a few times, you will then start to find a trigger within your brain of memory. So you will listen to the song and you'll hear those and you'll start to see those things. Now, the example I'm going to give you is, do you ever listen to a song and it takes you in your head to another place? It takes you to a place where you first heard it. For me, I hear Mr. Brightside and I'm at uni. I'm jumping up and down like a madman in the student union. Okay, that takes me instantly there. Taste. Sometimes you taste something and it takes you to a place. Once again, for me, if I taste mint, I'm back to being a 3-4-year-old on my grandma's garden, and I'm tasting this leaf and I'm not quite sure why it tastes the way it does. And it doesn't taste the same as a dandelion. And I've got that thought and I've got that image in my head. I've got it, but it instantly takes me there. But it's because it's a trigger. I associate that memory with taste, or I associate that memory with song. You can associate good performance with song, and it's a possibility to help you as you go through. Another way, the 6th tool and penultimate tool, is to ask yourself, what is your evidence for that? If you are starting to think negatively, or if you're starting to think positively about a session or a training session or a game, things like that, ask yourself, what's your evidence for that? What's your what pieces of information have you got to confirm what you are thinking? And that can be good or bad. It can be good or bad, because we can think that we're doing amazingly well, but then actually when we start to tot up the evidence, actually there's not much to confirm that. And likewise the other way, we can think that we're performing really bad, but actually there's not much evidence to suggest that either. So think about that as you go through this. What is your evidence for that thought process? Once again, it's a very, very simple thing. It's a very, very simple thing, but it does help, because it gives you the opportunity to think, actually, I've got this. I've got this. There's no evidence to suggest that I'm doing badly today. So actually, I'm going to carry on doing exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so that's something to help. And then the other thing, the final tool that I'm going to suggest is reflection. Reflection is key. It's key to any development process. It's key to moving forwards. It's key to reflecting on how you're progressing. Are you not progressing? Are you doing really, really well? All of those kind of things. So I would recommend, after every training session or after every game, list 3 things that you did well and 3 things that didn't go so well. And then think about why that was the case. Why did they go well and why did they not? And then using your profile, using your emotional profile as well that we've gone through in tools 1 and 2, cross-reference, and then see how you can use that for the future. How are you now going to address that for the future? Okay. So there's some simple tools there, and I know some people may be thinking, that's not for me. I'm not going to specifically listen to a song, or I'm not going to find some pictures, and that's perfectly fine. These tools are a take them or leave them, and they won't work for everyone, and that's perfectly normal. That's perfectly acceptable. But they are tools that work. They are tools that work from varying levels, and they can work for anybody. So that was this is where I set my stall out. I wanted to highlight what the stress process is. It's a whistle-stop tour. I do accept that. If we were face-to-face, we would have done a few little bits and bobs for that, but it is what it is from an online session. That's perfectly fine. Outline what happens to the brain, which we did. Discuss the concepts of mental fortitude, and explore 7 tools that can assist the mental side of performance. Now, I asked you at the start, what do you want to get from this session? Now, I want you to reflect on whether you got the answer to that question. And if you didn't, and if you've thought of any questions as we've gone through, now's your time to ask them. But thank you very much for listening, and it's completely over to you now, and bombard me with questions as much as you want.
Well, we're waiting for some questions. Quickly, that was fantastic. That was really, really good. It's something that definitely I've taken something away from, and I'm going to look to review at a later time as well and go back over it and make notes on the different sections. For me, sort of the main thing really was that the focus aspect, focus on the right thing rather than focus more. Really, really simple process and concepts, but it's something really you probably don't get caught up in too much. You get caught up in focusing or trying to focus more, but not focusing necessarily on the right area of the game and the right area that we need to be looking at. Has anyone got any questions at all for Lee before we finish off? I'm sure if you have later on down the line, feel free to drop them into me, and I'm sure I can get those across today. I'm sure we'd be happy to answer any as we go through. While we're doing that, Phil, have you got anything to add or say really?
No, sorry, I've been, but that was brilliantly. I really enjoyed that. There's a few things I can take away, not just football actually, but in my professional job. So really good. Thank you very much.
No worries at all.
No, perfect. Well, Lee, again, that was magnificent, and like I said, I'll get that on YouTube tomorrow. I'll circulate it amongst the group and our wider workforce and drop you the link. But really do appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule and ever increasing schedule. Good luck with the move to Northampton University as well. It's a fantastic new facility. I was attending Northampton University myself and actually studied sports studies involving sports psychology. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but was very rubbish at it. Hence why I've got you involved rather than me delivering the session. So all the best for that move in the future as well, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Also, for everyone else, that sort of really concludes the Referee Development Week. All of the sessions from this week will be uploaded onto YouTube tomorrow and will be circulated to you as well, including the session tonight. If you've got any questions about anything that we've witnessed throughout the week or anything from tonight as well, please do get in touch with me. And we can answer those as best we can. For those of you out on games tomorrow, particularly those that are out on the first round of the FA Cup, the season gets earlier and earlier every year, particularly this year when it's ended so late as well. Enjoy that if you're out on those FA Cup games and that experience, particularly if it's your first time out on an FA competition. Wonderful achievements and wonderful games to be involved in. Enjoy the weekend, and I look forward to catching up with you at a later date and time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers all. Have a great